Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, the GDN Bootcamp, Getting Started with the Google Display Network. In this hour, you're going to learn how to start placing pay-per-click ads on the Google Display Network. With an inventory of more than 2 million websites and apps, the Google Display Network gives you endless targeting options available to reach users, if you know what you're doing. Well, in today's webinar, Google PPC expert Brad Geddes will explain all the targeting methods used for the display network and will give you an overview of the possibilities. Then we're going to walk you through the most effective ways to start advertising across the display network. I really am looking forward to handing this off to our guest, our expert Brad Geddes. He's the author of Advanced Google AdWords. He's a co-founder of the award-winning company AdAlysis, an automatic platform for testing and PPC recommendation. And Brad frequently writes columns for Search Engine Land. He co-moderates the AdWords forum on Webmaster World. He's a course advisor for the digital marketing curriculum at Simplilearn. And it's a pleasure to have him talking about something a little bit different, the Google Display Network. So welcome, Brad. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Dan. So welcome, everyone. And today we're going to go over starting with the Google Display Network. So we're going to briefly take a look at what is it, just to make sure we're all on the same page with what it is. And then we're going to look at some of the targeting types. We'll go through remarketing and how to make remarketing lists and get started through marketing campaigns. From there, we'll move into the ads that are going to be displayed. And then how to expand with some in-market and similar audiences. So first off, when we say, what's the Google Display Network? So it's a collection of 3 million sites and apps where ads can be shown. So it's not search any longer, right? With search, someone's actively looking for you. With display, you're often attracting them away from the content they're engaged with, be it video, other text on a page, so forth. Now, 2 of the largest of the display partners are owned by Google, YouTube and Gmail. But there's a lot of others. Weather.com, Ask.com, New York Times, etc. are all display partners. And we think about reach, right? It's 90% of all internet users, and it serves over 1 trillion impressions per day. So it's a pretty large place to serve ads. So we have to think about the type of targeting we really want to get into. So we're going to spend most of our time today on audience targeting. But we're going to just make sure we define these 3 types and sort of look at how these fit in the funnel. So audiences are based upon first-party data is what we're going to talk about primarily today. And we'll cover first versus third-party data. This is where you're marketing to users based on behavioral data or similar characteristics of that user base. So you're marketing to the person's attributes, not necessarily the site itself. Now, contextual is different. Contextual, derived from content, right, is based upon what that page's data is, or similar pages users have been to very recently. And then finally, the third option is you can choose individual websites, apps, placements, videos where you want your ads to appear. So while search is often thought of it as much of the bottom of the funnel, when we think about display, we really want to look at the funnel and say, where are we trying to reach users? Are we trying to introduce our brand to users? Right, that's going to be a lot of the affinity audiences, similar audiences, and picking large placement sites. And today we're going to cover the similar audiences. We move to consideration, right? When someone's learning and shopping, well, that's in-market and custom audiences, and you can pick review sites, right, for placements. When someone's down ready to buy, that's remarketing we're going to get into first. And then retention is customer match, which is audience data based upon your CRM data. So today we're primarily going to focus on remarketing and then similar to remarketing, and then again is some of the in-market and custom. So we say, well, what exactly is an audience, right? So an audience is a collection of users who share similar characteristics or behaviors. So for instance, if someone came to your website, added something to your shopping cart, and then left, right? Their characteristic is they've added something to the shopping cart and abandoned that process. That's remarketing because it's based on your website behavior. Right? People just came to your website. That's an audience. Share a characteristic of being on your website. Again, that's behavioral. People who are currently shopping for a new car. Now, you may not know that information, right? You don't know until someone's been on your site and they've looked at your cars and automotive offers that they're shopping. So that's third-party data where Google looks at who has recently been looking at comparing cars and prices and dealerships. And so that's like an in-market audience. They share characteristics of currently researching cars, but not necessarily on your site. Now we have others like affinity. So users with a long-term interest in photography. So they may not be looking to buy a camera today, right? But they've got this long-term interest. Every once in a while they look at how to make better photographs and different ways of f-stops and how to change their photography settings on a camera. And so they're a great one if you're introducing a new product to and you just want to get the word out. And then we've got people with similar characteristics, people who are similar to those who converted on your website. So audiences can cover a lot of range of different behaviors. So when we get into audiences, we also have to think about is first versus third-party data. So first-party data means it's your information. You created the targeting method based upon information on assets you control. So with Customer Match, right, this is first-party data that comes from your website or your CRM system. Right? So remarketing is behavioral data based upon your assets, based upon your website. Right? And so first-party means it's your information. Now, third-party data means it's aggregated from another party. So it's, in this case, we're going to talk about using Google's data. So it would be similar audiences or in-market audiences where you can still market based upon this third-party audience data. It just doesn't happen to be yours. Now, while there's all these options across display, and there's 3 trillion impressions, right? There's 1 trillion impressions a day. We don't want all of those, right? We want to start with what's going to make us money first and then expand. So that's why we often start with remarketing. Right? So remarketing is marketing back to users who have already interacted with your website. There's a few reasons we want to start with remarketing. One is when we look at the customer journey, right? Nielsen says customers visit websites at least 6 times on average in the overall purchase process. Now, that may not just be retail. That includes finances and travel and form fills and insurance lead gen and so forth. In retail, right, consumers consult 10 sources of information and 90% will switch a device before making a purchase. So if you're thinking about just search, right, that's a touch point. Maybe they came back to you a second or third time even on search, right? That's 2 or 3 touch points. That's half or a third, right, of what the average person does before buying. So often what this remarketing is that reminder, right, to come back and finish something. People who abandon a shopping cart, 75% say they intend on returning to make a purchase. Now, intention and action are completely different. But I have bookmarks from 10 years ago of sites I intended to go back to. I probably never have looked at half those bookmarks before, but they're there. It's an intention, right? So that remarketing ad is saying, yeah, we know you want to go back. Here's your reminder to actually do it. So this is a big change. What's happened over time is the amount of touch points that exist before conversion. So this is a retailer I've worked with for, 15 years or something. And so we took 6 months of data from a few years ago, which is in blue, and said, how many times does a person visit your website before they convert? And a few years ago, it was almost 45% of people were one touch. And almost no one was 6 or more touches, right? That was very rare. And then we looked at the exact same data, exact same website a few years later and said, well, now how often is it taking someone to convert? And the trend line is the increase or decrease, right, in number of visits before conversion. And what we see is lower on, right, that 1, 2, 3 touch points. It's actually decreased for 1 and 2. And then when we look at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 12 plus touch points, right, that's where that big increase is coming from. And so what we're really looking at these days is consumers look more before buying. And in some cases, it's not that they look more, it's that we can now measure it, right? And 10 years ago, someone wasn't going to YouTube to watch TV. They were watching TV on television, right? And you couldn't track that along with your digital data. Well, now what they're watching on YouTube or Netflix or Hulu and so forth, you can track that back to your website. So we've added a lot of touch points we can also measure we couldn't before. So we think about, right, remarketing. That's our first party data. It's one of the best to start with because it really is that reminder to convert. The user's been to your site. They know the offer. They know what they're getting into. So when they click on an ad to go back to your site, there's no surprise involved, right? They've said, okay, I've been to the site, right? I understand what that offer is, and yeah, I'm ready to do something. And so that remarketing ad is a pre-qualified user because the user already understands the brand experience. So with remarketing, the very first step is, well, it's behavioral data based on website behavior, so you have to collect the behavior. So we have 2 options for how we want to collect this. We can install Google Analytics, and we can define our data within Google Analytics, or you can use the Google Ads tag. So if you go into your account, you go down to your audience data, right, and you've got Google Analytics attached to your account, right? You'll see your data right there, and if you haven't attached it, you'll see a spot to attach Google Analytics to your account. And then you're going to find your data within Google Analytics. If you don't use Google Analytics, you're a Core Metrics or an Adobe Analytics shop, right, then you're going to use the Google Ads tag often on your site. So step 1 is just getting your site tagged, whether it's Google Analytics or the Google Ads tag. Second step is defining your lists. Now, personally, for list definitions, I prefer Google Analytics because you can be really, really custom with your lists. So you're going to go into your admin section, go down to audiences, click on the button plus new audiences, and Google even suggests them for you, and create your lists. So it's fairly simple to get started by just going into your admin, audience, data, and then clicking new audience, and then you define, right, who should be added to the list. So for instance, in this case, we're just saying, if someone got to a page that says, thank you, put them in the list, right? You could make a list that's everybody who went to your website. Could be someone who got to the stage 1 of your form and abandoned your website. People who spent 3 minutes on your website. So the list possibilities are huge. They're endless, which is often why we want to start with some real simple lists of people who went to our site, people who started to convert and didn't finish, and people who converted, right? Some real simple areas. But to just give you an example of how complex you can get in this, right? Just to seed some future thoughts. Yeah, we work with a company who runs a lot of TV commercials. And with television commercials, most people go to your website within 0 seconds to 30 minutes of a commercial airing. And the 30-minute delay is because of a time-lapse watching where someone's watching 20 minutes behind, so they don't have to watch commercials. And they'll skip over some and still go to some websites. And so they keep a list of their flight schedules where they'll make a remarketing list that's only if someone came to their website from the market where the commercials are being aired within 0 minutes to 30 minutes after the commercial airing, and put them in a specific list, because that way they know in the remarketing ads, they're going to use the imagery from the TV commercial, right? And that's fairly complex setup, but that's how creative you can be with analytics. Excuse me. So when we think about using our lists, right, it's a fairly straightforward process where if we're using Google Analytics, we install Google Analytics, we go into our Google Ads account under linked accounts, and we connect it to our Google Ads. We go back to Google Analytics in the admin section and then define our lists. And then lastly, right, we add users to the ad group, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, if you're in Google Ads, you're going to install the Google Ads tag, and then you'll define your audiences in the Google Ads section in the audience data. And then you're going to add the list to those ad groups. Now, the last part of list creation is duration. How long should a user be in a list? A standard time frame is 30 days, right? Let's let everyone who went to our site for 30 days see our remarketing ads. If you're in an industry where it takes users 90 days, you're a lot of B2B stuff, it takes a long time for a user to really convert or look at offers, you can increase your list 90 days. If you're in an industry where people convert either really fast or they don't convert at all, then you may make a duration of 3 to 7 days. So some common lists to start with, right, is all visitors to your website, form abandoners, which means they started converting but then stopped, and then all your converters. Because a list can be negative. You could say, I want to reach everyone who abandoned the form, so they added something in their cart, went to checkout, or they went to page 1 of your 3-page form and they started it. And then you may make converters, right, people who actually finished it, a negative list. You're only marketing to people who started but didn't actually finish. Now, you can get much more advanced, right? You could say product viewers, only people who read our blog, only people who shared our blog. You could make things, another common one is you can do some audience definitions in Facebook and LinkedIn you can't do in Google Ads. So some people will use Facebook with some characteristics on it, right, to send traffic to the site, put the users from Facebook based upon those characteristics in a list, and then use that with Google Ads to remarket to them across places well beyond Facebook. So start simple, right? Visitors, abandoners, converters. Easy way to start. So a lot of expansion you can do. Now, if you have a structured data site with a lot of products, a large e-commerce site, a job site, a travel site, they all use structured data. You could use dynamic remarketing, which a lot of the steps are similar. There's just a little bit of difference in how the ads are rendered. And with dynamic remarketing, the user for the ad is going to see the products they viewed on the website. So if someone went to your site looking for a new job, your career site, and they looked at 3 individual jobs, and you give a feed to Google of the structured data, then the ads will actually be the jobs they saw. Same with merchants. You've probably seen ads across the web where the ad includes the products you viewed on a website. That's dynamic remarketing. So with dynamic, you can use your Google Merchant Center account to set this up, and it's fairly straightforward. So the question then is, how do we segment our websites to determine what list to use? Right? So it's easy to start with visitors, abandoners, converters. But sometimes you want to be more specific. Right? So in this case, this remodeling company based in Chicago, home service company, right? Because almost all websites are homepage, category, product, form fill, checkout. It just may be the form fill happens to be a form contact, and then you have a thank you page. So, they can make one list that's remodeling options, a different list that's room additions, a different list for outside things, fences and roofs and so forth. Or they could get more specific. They can make a list just for kitchen remodeling, just for bath remodeling, just for basement remodeling, and be even more specific. So when you're thinking about your segmentations, you must have 100 active users in a list for a display ad to be shown. So if each of their categories gets 20 visits a month, they could not make every one of these, or they would need to have a 5-month duration. And after month 1, they have 20 users, month 2, 40, etc., before that list goes live. Now, that's probably too long, right? To have a 5-month duration if someone's looking at putting up a fence or doing some interior painting. So if you have 100 visitors per category per month, or 10,000, a higher number, right? Then you can get more specific. So often what you're going to do is you're going to open your analytics system. If it's Google Analytics, this is super easy. If it's a different one, you can still do this, and list out, here's the audiences we want to make. And then in your analytics, pick the time frame for how long you think that cookie should last. So if you think it's a 30-day cookie, just look at last month right in your analytics. And then go to your page view section and say, all right, how many people visited the pages that we will put in that list? If that number is under 100, you want to either expand time frame or expand how many the pages that are cookied here. If it's well over 100, you can go ahead and make that list. Now, the second site, it's an e-commerce site. So we could say, well, their e-commerce site, they primarily sell cups and napkins, right, and ribbons. So we could make all visitor, a cup, a napkin, a ribbon, and a card banner, and a thank you. 5 lists and be done. But again, that's going to make it so that we're just showing a cup ad to someone who wants a logo or a picture or a frosted cup or a hard side plastic cup, right? And our ad is not going to be that specific to what a user looked for. So we could say, okay, well, we should go down another category and do logo napkins versus personalized napkins and logo cups versus personalized cups. And that makes our list, a little larger. Say, oh, we want to go down to the individual product level. Well, now the list just went from about 9 to several hundred. So as soon as your lists expand that quickly, you want to use dynamic remarketing instead. So if you're starting to look at your site and you see 5 or 6, even just 2 or 3, right, good lists, you don't have to worry about dynamic. It's when you're looking at segmentation, suddenly numbers jump up considerably. That dynamic is probably a better option. So then, all right, we create our lists. We import those lists to Google Ads. And then we just click Create Campaign, pick Display, create an ad group, which you've done before. Then in our ad group targeting, right, what we're going to see is a list of all the audiences we have, right? Just like adding keywords, but instead of being keywords, it'll be audiences. You select those, add them to the ad group, click Save. And now you've got an ad group with an audience in it. So then the next part is we need to have an ad for the audience. So let's get into making display ads. So there's 2 types of common display ads. You have responsive and you have image. With responsive ads, you give Google a set of assets, which we're going to look at on the next slide. And then Google's going to combine those assets together to show the ad. So this means your ad can show in any size rendering, right? It doesn't matter if it's a skyscraper or a banner or a square, right? Google will render it for you from those assets. Disadvantage, some of the ads don't look that good. Some are only text. There's no image. So you don't have as much brand control over the ad, but it's very easy to essentially have your ad shown in any ad format with very little work. Or we can do image ads. Now, as soon as we make an image ad, we have to make an image ad for every size. If we want to test images, we now have to make multiple images and multiple sizes to do some testing. A lot more work to do with images, but you have full brand control. So that's really the question, right? If you have a brand department, or you have a group that always looks over your ads, or you're in a regulated industry where you must have a copy of every ad that served an impression, you're probably no more with images. If, right, you're just like, We don't have a lot of assets. We don't have a brand manager. We're a smaller company. We just want to get something going. Then use responsive. So we then, in our ad group, right, go to the ads tab. We click on create new ad. We choose a responsive option. And then we're going to see, right, a way to set up the ads within Google Ads. So first you're going to pick your final URL. Where does the user go? And then you're going to pick 2 images. Now, if you have images you can upload that fit their model, a 4:1 and a 1:1, you can just upload your own images right in the interface, easy to use. If you don't, when you click on the edit icon, that pencil, you can search Google's library and use their images. Now, their images are stock. They look stock. Everyone can pick out a stock image. It's free to use. It's right there, so anyone can do it. But if you have your own imagery, it's better to use. Then you're going to pick your logo. Most people have their logo in a 4:1 format, which is perfect. You also want to add the 1:1 rendering. It's optional. You don't have to add it, but if you don't add it, you won't show in native ad formats. So it's best to use all 4, the landscape and the square, image and logos. You can add videos if you want to. Then you add your headlines. So they're responsive, meaning Google's going to render the ads different ways and try to learn which one to serve. So you can add 5 short headlines, right? And then you can make 1 long headline. Headlines, long or short, never show together. Only one headline's ever displayed at once. So it is okay to duplicate information in different headlines or use the same information in your short headline and your long headline. That's not a problem. Below that, you will see the option to make a description. A headline and a description can show together. So you really don't want to duplicate data from your headline to your description. And then you have the option of picking a call to action button and a little more things, but it really does not take long to make those responsive ads. Before you save it, you can see previews. So across the display network, YouTube, Gmail for mobile or computers, you can scroll through the primary formats, how your ads are going to be rendered, and say, oh, I don't like that one, and you could do some tweaks to how the text or the images are. Or if you're happy enough, like there'll be some renderings you're like, that's not really good looking, but it's not necessarily, against our brand. It's not we're trying to fix it because we'd have to switch to images. You'll have to just accept some of those. But you can preview your ads, right? Make sure you're happy with how things look, or even send this off, right, to a client. You can get a link that you need to review first. Save it, and now you can be showing remarketing ads. So then once we're start remarketing, we collect some data, we get some conversions, we're happy with it, right? Then our next step is usually to start expanding our audiences, expand our display network presence. So if we go right back to our targeting option, and we usually want to make this in a new ad group, so just in your display campaign, click plus new ad group, create an ad group, go to your audiences. Then right, we can say, who else do you want to target? So under Browse, there's 3 options. We have Affinity and Custom Affinity. Some of these are going to be combined later this year, and those be Custom Audience and then In-Market Audience. So you don't have to deal with some of these variations. But in general, Affinity is a long-term, right, involvement with a product or service. So people who are frequent travelers are Affinity. They like to travel. They may not be planning something right now. And then we have In-Market. Right? In-Market means they're currently researching one of those products. And then you've got, lastly, your remarketing and similar audiences off your remarketing, which we're going to touch on in a second. So if you're looking for users to introduce a product to who are a long-term user of something, that's what an affinity is for. If you're a performance marketer and you're just really getting into display, you should skip it for now and move to the in-market. So with in-market, you can do a search across the in-markets and see it's 167 or so categories. of all the different ways people are currently searching or buying something. These range from B2C to B2B areas. A lot of them expand. Autos and vehicles expands to SUVs versus luxury products versus trucks, etc. So you can get pretty specific in the in-market. Now, they don't know your brand, so they're not going to convert as well as remarketing is. However, these are people who are actively looking. They just may not know you exist, so they are a good group to often introduce your brand to. And then lastly, where we can really get into defining a lot of characteristics is custom intent. So this is, again, probably going to be custom later this year. It's going to be the overall same definition process where we can define URL someone's been to, products they've looked for, right? And then create an audience. Again, this is third-party data based upon, right, sites they've been to, types of things they've searched for or looked at or shown interest in to show ads to that group of users. Now then, as you add criteria on the side, you're going to see an idea of how many impressions you can get per week. We're in 19 countries, so this is across 19 countries when we look at it. If we're only in one, this data will be much smaller. And then we get an idea of some demographics, some age and gender, and potentially income level, depending on where you live, of that custom intent group. And if you're happy with it, you can save the custom intent and then make an ad group for it. Now, with things like custom intent and in-market and affinity audiences and remarketing, even if your ad is going to be the same for all the audience types, it's generally best to put them into different ad groups and sometimes even campaigns. That way, if you've added 5 custom intents and full remarketing types, you can really look at the ad group level, the difference in CPA, the difference in impressions, set your bids. You can set a bid at the audience level, so you can still bid by audience, but it's easier to sort of see your data over time. And the reason some people will do it by campaign is to control budgets by campaign. Remarketing is generally your most profitable. So they may have a very high budget for remarketing, but in-market and custom intents, right, usually aren't quite as profitable. If they're in the same campaign, they all share the same budget. So custom intent could serve so much, your marketing ad doesn't serve as much as it could. So that's why if you're starting to expand quite a bit, it is useful to do them by campaign from a budget standpoint. Now then, once you've been running remarketing, in-market, custom intent, so forth for a while, you'll start to see similar lists pop up in your account. So these are users who are similar to a list that you are running. So if your user list is all users and you have a very large, wide variety audience, your similar list may not be that useful. If you have a list of only people who converted and you're a fairly niche website, so it's a really specific person, your similar lists are probably going to be fantastic to use. So they're similar to your list. If your list is very broad, then your similar list is going to be even broader, right? It's similar people who've ever been to your website. It can be pretty broad. If it's only people who have gone to a product page and you're a specific retailer or lead gen, right? Your car insurance, that can be much narrower and be a much better user base. So we like similar a lot. We use it personally quite a bit, but we don't generally use it off of everyone who's been to our blog. That's a very broad audience. Instead, we'll use it for people who are subscribers, users who abandoned the shopping cart because they got that far, and they can be incredibly good lists to use. So what happens then, right? As we're expanding remarketing, we're really moving up the funnel. So remarketing, more buy phase. Oh, my circle got moved. And then consideration, right? In market, a little broader. and then affinity audiences, similar audiences, so forth, even further up the funnel. So remarketing is a good one because that search is buy-based, right? And remarketing is that really good first step since it is a buy-based audience. And then we're moving up the funnel. Now, the display network is massive.
Great. Hey, Brad, I just want to interrupt for a second here, just because I have one person asking. Actually, a couple of people have asked the same question here now, and it seems appropriate talking about this at the moment. But would you get more engagement with in remarketing ads using with your marketing ads with a video? I think that so. We've had two questions about people asking about the effect of video in remarketing.
Oh, sure. Okay, so that's a great question. So let's go back here real quick. So you can add videos to your ads. If this ad is going to be shown in an app, probably never going to be displayed. If it's shown on a website, video may or may not be displayed. Now, so for remarketing that is not on YouTube, adding a video may help some, but they're not always going to be displayed. You can do remarketing purely on YouTube, which of course you can use a responsive ad or a video, and your videos are definitely going to be shown on YouTube. So when we look at our previews, right, you can see the YouTube specific preview, which is not clicked over. It'd be one over on our screen here. So videos useful to add for your general display, but they're not going to be shown that often. And for YouTube, super useful, of course, to use on YouTube. Again, in Gmail, they're not going to be displayed. So the video options, worthwhile for desktop users to add one or two if you're really happy with them. Imperative to use them if you're going to run remarketing across YouTube properties, though. And with YouTube, I'm just going to expand on this real quick, then we'll jump back to where we were. When you remarket, you can actually choose only do remarketing on YouTube. When you do remarketing on YouTube, you can do even custom lists off of that of people who watched your YouTube videos or users who watched at least 30 seconds of a YouTube video. And so if you're doing either a lot of just organic YouTube or you're doing marketing on YouTube, you can make custom lists that you can actually use across the display network based upon that YouTube interaction as well. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, it definitely seems to. We have another question coming in, but we can probably save this for a little bit later so we can have you go beyond this here. But
we have like 5 minutes left, then we'll get into all of our good questions. How's that?
Okay, great. So barrel through, and we've got a lot of interest with people chiming in with specific questions. So yeah, all right, onward and upward.
All right, so when we talk about 3 million websites and apps, right, some of those are going to be bad for a lot of people. Some are going to be really good for one company and really bad for another company, right? And so we often want to control our ad serving and say, wow, that's just not a good placement for me. So in your accounts, when you go down to the placements data and you click over to where ads showed, this is going to tell you the actual URLs, websites, etc., where your ads were displayed. So when we talk often in search about examining query data, right, to say, oh, if a search query has more than 150 clicks and no conversions, we may want to make it a negative keyword, right? Some basic rules. Same thing applies to where ads showed. We often are looking for sites or apps where we have a lot of spend, but not a lot of conversions. And so we can look at our CPAs, our cost data and conversion data to say, wow, that's a lot of spend, not enough conversions. And just like queries, right, select them and exclude them. If we really like a site, we can even select it and add it as a site and even adjust bids for a site to show more or less on a specific site. So same as when you're running keywords, you look at your query data to find new keywords or find negative keywords. For anything across display network, we're going to look at our placement data where ads showed is the same as search queries, right? Create our filters to say if site is doing X, we want to make it a negative, which is called an exclusion on the display network, and stop our ads there. So that same workflow applies. Now, what is important though is the brand protection items. So again, display network includes mature audiences. It includes game sites. It includes park domains. There's several types of content it excludes. So you can go to your account or your account level data or any one of your campaigns, and you'll see excluded types and labels where you can say, okay, I don't want to be shown on this type of content. And you can exclude content types. So that way, if you're selling, Disney World tickets, you probably don't want to be shown on mature audience sites. Probably not a good one for you, right? And choose how to do this. So this is primarily brand protection items of keeping your content off of certain types of sites. So just to quick recap, right? The display network's huge. I mean, it's 3 million sites and 1 trillion daily impressions. So it's not that you can't get inventory there. It's really about controlling across those trillion impressions who you really want to serve an ad to, right? So with remarketing, this is often the reminder to convert. It's behavioral targeting. I mean, everyone who says, oh, we're doing behavioral marketing, if you're doing remarketing with Google Ads, you're doing behavioral targeting. And the key to getting that right is segmenting your website into appropriate lists, right? Just like we think of search ad groups, small groups of keywords, highly related within highly related ad. Same thing applies to your lists. What do the user do on your site? What are they looking for? Why do different types of users go to your site? Right? Those should be specific lists within ad group with a specific ad that talks about the reason they were there and why they should come back and complete an action. So with display ads, we can do images, which means we must create multiple sizes, but we have full brand control. We can make responsive. They can show anywhere, but we have less control. But you want to make sure that you have complete ads, meaning you're running 2 logos, 2 images, a short headline, a long headline, a description, etc. Then we think of expanding display. We're often going to start with in-market because they're currently researching products. Right? Then we may branch out into similar audiences or the custom intent audiences. And then don't forget to look at the where ads show data to block placements that are underperforming and then use the content exclusions, right, from placement protection. All right, now, rest of questions, Dan, I'll let you chime in here.
Here's one that was just asked is, how do you exclude bounce or session durations below 10 seconds in remarketing? And also, how do you figure out what's the best page to send audiences to? For example, if you have a visited product page audience, do you send them to the home page or to the product page?
Okay.
Is that pretty clear? Okay.
Yes. So let's take the second one because that's super easy. If you're using dynamic remarketing, the URL the user clicks on will be that product. But you want to bring them back overall back to that offer. If it's a product, put them back on that product. Maybe category if you're not doing individual products, it's more category based. If someone downloaded a white paper on your website and you put them in a list, and after they download a white paper, you really want them to take a trial, put them to your take a trial page, and here's why we start. Right? So again, usually a page specific for that list. It doesn't mean you have to make a page for the list specifically, but what page would they expect to see after being on your site previously, right, to get re-engaged quickly? Now, for the bounce question, that's a great question. So first off, a bounce in Google Analytics is a one-page page view or a page view until an event occurs. So that last part's super important when an event occurs. So if in Google Analytics, you program an event to occur after 10 seconds. It doesn't have to do anything. You just say, hey, GA, after 10 seconds, fire event called still here. Right? Then, right, in your list, you can define that only include users where the event still here was triggered. And that would make it so that you would no longer be remarketing to people who came to your site less than 10 seconds. So because doing a non-bounce is tricky, because if someone gets to your offer page and reads for 5 minutes and then leaves, they're technically a bounce because they only were a one-page page view. So that's why coding in an event that doesn't have to do anything but just trigger some words, hey, user has not bounced, whatever, will let you only include, make an all visitor list, but it's really, we call it an all engaged visitor list, meaning we cut out the people usually less there than about 30 seconds or so.
With a wide variance in the quality of publishers, what's the best way to identify and remove low-quality publishers and get more impact from high-quality publishers on a network?
So this depends on how aggressive you want to be. So you can go into your Google Ads account and say, show me people with usually, let's say your conversion rate's 2%, meaning every 50 visitors should convert. So you can make a rule that says, all right, every 100 visitors with no conversions, let's just block them. But it takes 100 visitors. And that's the easy way to do it. It's right in the interface. It's easy to select the apps or videos or websites in the interface and easily exclude them. What it's not going to do is cut out the low-quality publishers when they're only at 30 or 40 clicks. So the other way, you can see this data in Google Analytics with bounce rates, page views, time on site, etc., also included. So we'll often make a filter in Google Analytics saying time on site is 0 or bounce is 90% or higher, and visitors is usually about 20, 25 or higher. And block those pretty fast, because if you have 25 visitors and it's 100% bounce rate, that's usually an indication of a low quality site. So that's usually the easiest way to do it. Second, if on this screen we click over to Exclusions tab, one of the options is apps. And you could block app categories. For most non-app install campaigns, mobile apps don't convert, with the exception of Google Drive and Gmail and some Google-owned properties. So you can often go into the app category and block a lot of them very quickly. Now, some people do okay on apps, especially app installs. So, don't just do that always by default, but that's the only way to get rid of a lot of app traffic before you start advertising too.
Does it make sense to count view-through conversions for display or remarketing campaigns? They sort of play a role in helping people remember to come back and make a purchase on your site, but does it really help to count those?
View-through is a philosophy, not necessarily a marketing tactic. So just for everyone's knowledge, a view-through means someone saw your ad on site A, didn't click on it, didn't engage with it, and later on went to your site through some other means and converted. Do you give value to the impression that the user did not interact with? And so view-throughs are treated so differently across companies. Coke and Pepsi and the big brands, that they want the ad view as much as the click. They want to count that. A lot of performance marketers are like, you didn't engage, we don't know if you even looked at it, and they will discount that. So it helped the credibility a little bit when Google made an impression. 50% of the ad was displayed for, I believe it's 1 second or longer. Maybe it's 3 seconds or longer. 1 second or longer. So, but if only half the ad's displayed, then it still counts as an impression. Do you count that as a view-through? And so that's really a marketing philosophy question that is not necessarily answered with data. I've never seen anyone answer that question with data. It's always been a how we do. It's kind of like attribution. It's a philosophy, not necessarily a data set.
How long should you wait after creating a new display campaign before analyzing its performance?
That's a traffic question, right? So if you get 1,000 clicks in the first 2 days, you should analyze it. If you get 10 clicks in the first 2 days, you should just let it run for a little bit. Generally, we're going to look at it the next day or two just to make sure the traffic looks right. The sites were being shown. We're going to flip over the demographics and make sure the demographics seem to match up correctly. And that's not initially isn't really there to say, oh, we need to get rid of the list or whatever. It's really there to make sure we didn't do something stupid and forget to add an exclusion or whatever, and make sure the quality looks right. But it's probably going to be 1 to 2 weeks the minimum before we make major changes. So we want it to breathe a little bit, get a chance to do stuff. So usually a week or two before anything drastic's done.
In remarketing, is it possible to exclude certain audiences, for example, to show an ad to all visitors who visited your homepage except for those who also visited a specific page for registered users? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. So when you go to the audiences, right, so you'll also have negative audiences. So you would add your targeting is all visitors, your exclusion is people who went to this page. So now you're showing an ad to everyone who did not go to that page. So just like keywords can be positive and negative, an audience could be positive or negative.
Marketing ads.
No, it's the same CPC auction system. Same bid options are there too, CPA bidding, eCPC, CPC, whatnot. So overall, the way ad rank and all that stuff is calculated is the exact same.
Right. What about managed placements? What do they allow advertisers to do?
Sure. So if we had this data here on the screen and we looked at the placements tab instead, it would be blank by default. If we take one of these sites and we make it a managed placement, right, meaning where ads showed means we targeted our ads off of some criteria, an audience or whatnot, and that's where our ad got displayed. A placement is when we specifically state, I want to be on that site. So if you make an ad group with a placement and an ad, right, that's basically saying, show my ads all you want to, but only on this website. And you can set a bid for that placement. If here we're triggering our ads off of audiences, but if we add a placement, then a placement becomes a bid modifier, or we could say, show my ads anywhere based on my audience list, but if they're on this site, raise or lower my bid. Now that'd be the default way to add it. You could make it in your targeting, right? It's the and or operator, right? Observation or targeting. If we added the placement as targeting, which would be a mistake for the most part with remarketing, we're saying only show my ad on that website to this audience. So it's usually when you're triggering ads off of audiences and you add a placement, you want to add the placement as observation, meaning I want to see the stats, I want to raise and lower my bids, but I don't want to target only on that site. If we only want our ads shown on a site, then make a new ad group, make an ad, only add that website, and now you're showing ads only on that specific site.
Someone's asking, should you use accelerated delivery for high-value audiences in remarketing, or try bidding strategies such as maximize clicks for those high-value audiences?
Accelerated delivery means Google's going to serve the ad as fast as possible, as opposed to standard, meaning they'll serve it throughout the day. If you have a budget you're never hitting and you just want to make sure the ad shows as much as possible, accelerated is great. If you have a budget you're always hitting, then you generally want to use standard to even out the ad display. If it's a high-value audience, I might start when we first add the audience. We might use max clicks because what we want is a lot of data to evaluate and then decide how we want to tweak the campaign. As a long-term strategy, I don't like max clicks because Google doesn't care about the quality. So you're saying it's a high-value audience, but they just want the most clicks possible. But it's a high value because it converts well, meaning it has a low CPA usually. So you're generally better off, once you have enough data the system can kick in, using a CPA bid based upon what your value of that audience truly is, and not let Google just spend the money.
Right. Here's a quick one. Is there any way to show GDN ads based on app usage behavior instead of web visits behavior?
If you are using Fire, I'm not an app expert. Apps are a little different. If you're using Firebase, then Firebase data, I believe, can also be imported into Google Ads. So you would, instead of defining your data in GA, you define your data in Firebase, which is an analytic system for apps for the rest of our users here. And then in Google Ads, you can serve the remarketing ads off of GDN based on the Firebase behaviors.
Right. Brad, what's your opinion of the new discovery ads that Google announced at the Google Marketing Live show?
I don't know. So the discovery ads are if you're an Android user and you've got a Pixel phone and you swipe left, meaning you're going to see that feed that Google gives you of articles it thinks you should be reading. And Google's going to put ads in there, and they're called discovery ads.
Yeah.
What we don't some of the betas for it have looked decent for large retailers, and for people, again, top of funnel, somewhere, I don't have the funnels the other direction, but when we're talking top of funnel, they'll probably be useful. I've seen some good data for retailers introducing a spring and summer wardrobe collections. But again, that's, showing we're Macy's and we're going to start showing off, here's what we're going to sell this summer. And there's good results. From a small business standpoint, I initially don't have high hopes unless there's some real specific targeting Google's going to allow on top of it, which is still to be seen how some of that works once it leaves beta. So we play with some in beta, good results with large companies, not so with small ones, but have hopes it'll be another inventory source.
Mm-hmm. Which types of image ads achieve the best results? Do static JPEG ads or moving GIF or other types of ads perform better?
Usually HTML5 that have some movement to them because they attract the eye get better click-through rates. Now, that doesn't mean the conversion rate's any better, right? Conversion rates usually don't change that much, static ad versus a dynamic ad, but click-through rates definitely change. There's no question about it.
Great. Is a display campaign optimizer worth trying? Does it make a difference?
I have seen 24 campaigns that use display campaign optimizer. 2 had good results.
Okay.
So, right, I can't say completely it's not worth trying because 2 were good results and 1 very surprisingly good results. The first one was for a company who had a 10% conversion rate on display, was over 10,000 clicks and 0 conversions. So that was my introduction, and it's gotten a little better than that, but not a huge amount yet.
Yeah, if you use Smart Shopping, will it take impressions and clicks from your remarketing campaign?
Yes.
Since it also does remarketing as well?
Yes.
Smart Shopping.
So this is the biggest. So with Smart Shopping, Google will serve your at-a-cost search and display. I've seen some good results with Smart Shopping, so I don't want to knock the system here, but the biggest issue that we run into is that the company had a really good remarketing setup, and the Smart Shopping was not attracting new users. It was really cannibalizing the remarketing, and the total sales, especially new sales, decreased. I've seen that several times, but I've also seen some small companies use Smart Shopping incredibly well, and if they didn't have that sophisticated of remarketing setup, there was no problem. But if you've got really good remarketing campaigns, watch Smart Shopping closely to see if they start dropping, and you need to switch budget to the Smart, or if your new customer acquisition drops, like often shopping's new customer, remarketing is returning customers at times. So you're going to want to watch that balance.
Right. Now, is that the same as what do you think of smart display campaigns? Is that the same question, or?
Yeah, well, no, smart. They're terrible. What I've seen so far. Okay. Again, kind of like DCO, I've seen a couple good ones and primarily really poor ones.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your questions. This has been quite a lively session here. I just want to say thank you again, Brad, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for hosting us and keeping us moving along.
My pleasure, and thank you everyone again, and we'll see you next time.